Welcome everybody to the After Dark Show. I'm Don Rogers. I'm really excited to have tonight's guest with me. It's actually an individual that I met through my interdimensional exit buddy, Canadian Spinja. His name's Phil Warden, and I'm just going to give you a brief rundown on what he's got going on and why he's on the show because it's a very interesting story, and I'm really excited to share it. So after a paradigm shifting Reiki session in 2013, Phil's life changed forever. And he kind of began his own spiritual understanding and awakening after that session because it changed him so fundamentally. And now he's received training in a number of different modalities, including core shamanism. I'm going to screw this up. I'm just going to say Reiki because I'll never get the first word right.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
spiritual hypnosis, and is currently the host of the Unexplained Inc. podcast. And he has a really interesting journey to share with us and a lot of very valuable points on a lot of issues that are really big in our community right now. So I just want to say thank you for taking time out for this, Phil, and welcome to the After Dark Show.
Don, thank you so much for having me. I'm returning the favor because yourself and your interdimensional partner appeared on my show last month, which was a really good time. And once again, before we start, I want to say a much heartfelt congratulations on your union from a couple of weeks ago. That day happened to be a provincial holiday in Ontario, so I didn't have plans till late in the day and I didn't have to work. So I was able to join in on the live stream and it was wonderful in every sense of the word. So I just wanted to throw that out there first. So I guess I should start from September 2013, if that's where you want to go with all of this.
Yeah, we'll just do it on a timeline. If we jump around like my ADD tends to make us, it happens, but we'll get to the good stuff.
Yeah, no problem. So I just want to give a snapshot of where I'm at that point in time. I'm actually in really good physical shape because I am doing heavy manual labor in the colds late at night, and it takes a lot out of me. It's a lot of endurance, but I'm in very good shape. However, my home life could be in a little bit better shape. And the reason I bring this up is a few short months later, my marriage would come to an end, which I kind of saw coming in a lot of different ways. And when I got home from work, sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning or later, everybody in the house is asleep, including the pets. So there's some nights I'm so wired and I go onto YouTube just to find videos to relax and take the edge off of my 8 or 10 hour day or whatever. And this has probably happened to you and others you've spoken to, is that sometimes, whether it's in your algorithm or in your peripheral vision or on your phone, something will catch your eye and will appear, and you have no idea how it got there. Or you look back in a memory and you're like, I don't know where this came from, but this was very significant. And I stumbled upon the demonstration of Reiki, otherwise known as hands on or hands off energy healing. And I looked into this and I was really drawn to it. And the demonstration helped me relax, take the edge off, get a good night's sleep. And it inspired me to look for practitioners in my city. And I found one. And like I said, I was going through a bit of stress at the time. I took a chance. I went in, had the session, and I have this vivid memory of parking at the clinic, and just going like shaking my head and going, what am I doing here? Like, this is so ridiculous. I don't think this is going to work, but let's do it anyway. Fast forward to after the session, the practitioner tells me I have a lot of unspoken words and the big blockages are in my throat chakra, which was 250% true at that time. And I felt amazing afterwards. And this is a quote I use often when I tell the story. I felt like I had had an exorcism of the soul in a way because a lot of bitterness, disappointment, grudges I had been holding in the past, they were all gone. And my mood, at least for the next day or so, I was smiling and laughing a lot for no reason. Like I literally felt like a new person and I knew I was onto something. I just didn't know to what extent this part of the journey would take me on.
I actually want to jump in there because I have talked to a couple other people where they've had an energy healing or a Reiki session, even more specifically, be a paradigm shifting point of their life. Now, did you get the other people I've talked to had like the one guy, the girl who did it actually told him his memory. Did you have like a fundamental unlock in your brain? Like it just released everything that you were holding in, right? There's something that I've heard unlocks in that first session where you just kind of become more in tune with yourself. And sometimes the practitioner will tell you, and sometimes you realize it on your own. And I just didn't know if that was parallel to yours.
Sure, I mean, everybody's experience is different, and I can't say mine was quite like that, but I totally am in tune with what you're saying about the releasing. And energetically speaking, you just feel lighter. Like you feel like not quite weightless, but just a lot of the heavy stuff I had been carrying was gone. And it just made me realize I don't need this. Now, an interesting side effect, and I think this also was me being on top of my lifestyle at the time, was that in the coming weeks and months, my dreams got pretty wild. I was having what I would call psychic premonitions in my sleep. And then, usually within a day or two, they would manifest in my waking life in front of my eyes. And I'm sure, like many at this stage of their waking up or early goings of their journey, it scared the living shit out of me because at the time, I had no one to talk to about it because I don't even know how many people I told about that session at the time because I was like, "Oh, this is crazy hippy dippy stuff. I don't want to be caught going here." But then it had this effect on me, and from there, these premonitions and these dreams helped me navigate the next few months of my life, which were quite turbulent. And I won't get super specific on them because it's a lot of personal stuff to unlock, but I felt like they were either warnings about upcoming turbulence or they were connecting me with people I needed to talk to or needed to get to know on the next level of my journey. And like that's exactly what happened. And that led me down a rabbit hole of, I used to, well, I still listen, but about a year or so later, I started listening to a podcast called The Psychic Teachers, which started in 2010 and is still going to this very day. And I actually reached out to one of the hosts to talk about what was going on with me because I thought, well, if someone's going to understand, it's one of the hosts of Psychic Teachers. And not only did she get back to me, but she recommended a book by an author. I want to say his name is Larry Dossey or Dorsey. I could have that wrong. It's been a long time since I've read his material, but he has an entire book on premonitions. And if you're going through something like that and you need some validation and you don't have many people to talk to, his book is a really good place to start.
I think that's really valuable too. And I can actually relate to what you're saying, and it seems like a lot of us that are kind of kicked out of bed. I That's the only analogy I really have because like some people like slow drip into this, and others you get pushed into it, and it always seems like there's somebody in your immediate contact there to catch you. Like for me, it was typical skeptic Rob Khalil had me put under hypnosis and all of that, and it explained everything after seeing Arkeem Rana's show. It really seems like the universe, even in like it's time to get the hell out of bed situations, won't leave us hanging. Like they're gonna put somebody in your path to help you.
Yeah.
And
Another, I'm sorry to interrupt, but another blessing I had
no,
was my Reiki practitioner. Um, we gained a lot of trust with each other, and eventually, even though she was practicing part-time at a clinic, she eventually had me go to her house and do the sessions in her basement, which had even stronger energetic connections. But she was a major mentor at that stage of the journey with me, and I'll never forget this. She lent me some DVDs and books, and I went out to her place before working my evening shift one day to return them to her, and I asked her a couple of questions, and it goes in line with some of the things I've been telling you. And I remember her answering one of my questions, and this is like early 2014, clear as day, saying, "Oh, that's just your guides." And nobody had ever said anything like that to me before, and I almost went like, what the hell are you talking about? Like I have no idea what this is at this point in time. And then I knew from there that I'm like, okay, I'm into something that's way bigger than me and everything else around me and what I could possibly understand. I'm just going to take this slowly.
Yeah, and I again think that's awesome that you had somebody right there to like kind of guide you through this. And it's funny because I'm just going to make a weird analogy. It seems a lot of the people in this community that tell us about our guides are often one of them, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just kind of physical form. Like it's like, oh, I'm here to help. I'm like, no, you already are, right? You think you're pointing me in the direction, but you're already guiding me. Uh, for myself, like I've never been to an in-person or even online Reiki session. Can you set like, we'll say an in-person one? Can you set the scene as to like what goes on? Is it can like I've had some deep tissue massage and stuff done, but I've never had an energy session. So can you set like a basic in-person session? Like what would that look like?
Sure. I'll tell you what I'll do because I've seen it from both ends now. I'll start it from the client's perspective and then I'll shift it to the practitioner's perspective because I graduated to that, like we said before, right? So, from a client's perspective, depending on the practitioner, you may have to fill out a basic intake form, and some of that's for, insurance liability reasons, which is always something you want to do. And usually you will be in a quiet room, candles, soft music playing, similar to what would be set up for a regular massage. And you have a massage table with sheets, linens, pillows on it. And you go and you just lay down. And to me, a good practitioner beforehand will thoroughly go and wash their hands while you're setting up and give them a little bit of a rub like this just to get the charge going on, right? And from there, they will basically do either hands on or hands off, your choice or their choice, and just do a basic body scan and some energetic sweeps. Every practitioner is different, every session is different, but it's almost like a massage is for the physical body and the physical ailments. A Reiki session is for the energetic body and the energetic ailments because I know you're aware of this. We have our physical body, our mental body, our emotional body, and our energetic body, which we cannot see, but it definitely impacts us in how we feel and how we interact with everybody. So it's like self-care and pampering and clearings for the energetic body. And the main areas that get worked on are the seven chakras or chakras, however you want to pronounce them. And you will basically get those chakras back in alignment, whatever is needed. And it's almost in a way, it's like giving this vessel some form of an oil change, but on an energetic level and getting the bad stuff out. And not even so much bringing the good stuff in. It's the good stuff is already going in. It's already there. It's just all these other things the world throws at us will block our connection to the divine. And the Reiki practitioner and anyone that is worth its weight in gold, and I know we're going to touch on this later, any practitioner that says, I don't do the healing, I'm just the vessel for the energy for you to heal yourself, that's what it's really all about. And to give you a little insider's look from a practitioner's point of view, because I've been a practitioner since 2021, just starting to step into that lately. You would basically, intake form, wash your hands, do the smudging and all that, set everything up for your clients. And every practitioner is different. But with me, this is my left hand, my non dominant hand. The areas that need the most work, when I do the body scan, it'll start shaking like this. And so far, it has never, ever failed me, even when I've done distance Reiki. And then that's the area I work on the most. And I just go from area to area. And if the chakras get cleaned up and the client is in relaxation, I like to work the crown and I like to ground out at the feet and the ankles and just do whatever areas will keep them in that state of relaxation for the next hour or whatever. And one more thing I'd just like to add is that this is kind of a new development in my journey and my story is that I'm getting clairvoyant and clairaudient hits while I'm working on clients, which is so cool and so neat. And I think that's only going to sharpen over time. And I say that too because a future practitioner I would become a client for also doubled as a psychic medium, and she would blend the two together. So there's a lot of cool different possibilities you can receive from this as a client and as a practitioner.
That's actually something I've heard from other practitioners is like when they're doing their scans, they'll actually kind of close their eyes and they can basically envision the physical body in front of them. And as they're scanning, it actually works like in photocopier or something. And they can like see through their hands over the body, the energetic body that they're visualizing. Is that pretty close to what you're doing?
It is pretty close. And actually, there's something really neat I want to share with you that happened very recently. At the end of July, I set up a table as a vendor for the very first time at a holistic healing fair. And I was doing pay what you can Reiki sessions and trying to promote my new online venture and the podcast. And one of the clients I saw that day, she was very relaxed, very satisfied with the work I did. But when she opened her eyes, sat up, and came to, and we were having our discussion, she said, "Did you shine a light in my eyes at all?" And I said, "No, absolutely not. I don't do that." But sometime when I was working her crown or her third eye, she got this large beam of white light while her eyes were closed. There was no lighting change in the venue. I certainly didn't shine a flashlight. Like I would never do something like that, but the divine gave her a beaming of white light because it's what she needed in the moment.
That's amazing. You actually touched on distance healing as well, and I know some people. I believe anything's possible after the things I've learned in the last year. So, when you do distance healing, is it basically ascending and an accepting of the energy because it is over a distance? Like, of course, if we were in the same room, it's much easier for you to do your thing. But for you and I to do it from a distance, you have to be receptive to it, right? Because if you're just sitting
Yeah.
on the other end going, okay, Phil's sending me energy, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Now, I received distance Reiki by two different practitioners over the years, and it had a very profound effect on me. And then earlier this year, I was finally able to start giving it back over Zoom, like we are right now, like we're talking right now. And I just had the client lie down in a comfortable position, turn their video or audio off, and I just did my typical body scan and had the shaking left hand, and I was able to work each area like I would in an in-person session. Now, and I know, Don, you're more than aware of this. Energy knows no bounds, and time and space don't necessarily apply. And this person I gave the session to was in British Columbia, like the west coast of Canada, long, long ways away from me. And she felt the energy fully. So, I mean, I'll always lean towards in person because that direct connection is always stronger, but it can be pretty strong through the pipeline like this and can reach more people who aren't accessible to you geographically.
I I totally buy it and get it because I do have a weird understanding of energy and stuff. And even the devices we're using right now are projecting an energy, and so are we. So if we project our energy into the device, who says it can't travel through the waves? Like,
100%, 100%. Now, there's something I want to add to that because I just thought of it right now is that if you ever interact with someone who's done a Reiki session and they said, well, it didn't work or I didn't feel anything, that happens sometimes. But a lot of the times you hear someone say that, um, they're not being receptive to it, even if it's not consciously. Unconsciously, they have a wall put up and they're doubting and they're skeptical and they're sitting there, lying there, going, I don't think this is going to work. And there are some odds that maybe you also visited a practitioner who didn't have a strong connection and doesn't have a healthy, positive lifestyle to maintain that contact with the divine. So their work may not be as strong as another practitioner. So if you don't have a great session, try again with another practitioner. And if that doesn't work, dig a little deeper as to what's blocking you from receiving that energy from the divine.
I I think that's really good advice because I do think like our human minds work in some wonderful, wonderful ways. Like, and this is kind of the inverse of the placebo effect because you're accepting healing from wherever, but like our minds can make imaginary medication work for us. Like, so if we believe that we can receive, then we can receive and it can be projected into us. Like I 100% get what you're getting at here. Um, so that brings us into Reiki. At what stage did you decide to go into the core shamanism and getting that certificate or modality or whichever you want to? I don't know
Sure.
exactly what you would call that, but
Yeah, yeah. Modality certification, whatever you will. Um, I have to do a little bit of backtracking with this because the discovery of Reiki and the discovery of core shamanism, excuse me, there's a bit of a gap there. A lot of big changes and a lot of life stuff happened, which I won't get into right now. But of course, it had an incredible effect on me, and a lot of it had to do with squaring up and resetting my karma, and it was going to shape my life for years and years to come. So, in the midst of all that, my Reiki practitioner also got me on a brief kick of mindfulness meditation and making it become more regularly a regular thing, I should say. And this led to me, I think it was the following winter, I ended up at an event at my local library called Beating the Winter Blues because I was going through kind of a down patch. And the person running it recommended some books. I read one of them, don't remember who the author was, but the author in this book talked about Wayne Dyer. And then I discovered Wayne Dyer and his books. I'll just say they came to me at the right place at the right time in every possible way. And I went deep down that rabbit hole and it opened so many other doors for me. So I started like just devouring as much spiritual content as I could. My outer life was total chaos. And somehow I stayed on top of it. And those books and the energy healing and the meditation helped me stay on top of that. But I had a harsh lesson to learn and I didn't know it at the time. I, of course, at that period of time in my journey, like many, start to dabble in manifestation and reading into the law of attraction and all that stuff. And that to me is mostly good stuff. However, it can be a little skewed at times and your ego can take over. And I was manifesting things, frankly, that were not meant for me. And when they did not come to fruition the way I hoped they would, and a few setbacks and chances went against me, I started to become bitter and had a bit of another downturn in my life. And I really went into a mode of existential crisis because I was like, if this amazing new stuff I've been studying doesn't work, what does work? Is this just a giant con job? Like, what is going on here? And it took me a long time to pull out of it. And once again, like Reiki, this subject literally fell into me right in front of my eyes without realizing it. um, in March of 2019, I had been through kind of a down winter. My moods were not great. My energy wasn't great. My inner fire wasn't burning the way it should be. And I was meeting up a friend of mine for dinner who lived just about an hour away. And I happened to be a whole series of events happened that day that put me ahead of schedule. So, with time to kill before meeting my friend for dinner, I went to a local bookstore, a chain bookstore at a mall, and just went to like the spiritual section. And I see this book that is like the most beautiful book cover I've ever seen in my life. And I always mess up the title. It's probably here on my computer somewhere or out in my living room, but the title is very close to Navigating the Heart Path. And it's written by a man named Jeff D. Nixa. And it's one of those books you'll have to order online these days because I think a lot of the paperbacks are out of print now. In fact, a new friend I made from the podcast messaged me last week and said he bought the book online. So, like, it's still available. And it was from my recommendation, which was amazing. So, Jeff Nixa is a man who lives in the Midwestern US, I think like Indiana somewhere, and he's a former law professional turned hospice chaplain turned shamanic practitioner. And one led to the other and led to the other. And he called himself an urban shaman, which I thought was kind of cool because it's basically doing old shamanic practices in an urban environment or in a city. And what really touched me about this book was is that he was helping countless people, and like he had his own retreat center in the woods and his own sweat lodge, like all this cool stuff. People, young adults in their 30s at the time, like me, who were just totally lost and burnt out with what was going on in their life, he was leading them back to their power, back to their passion, back to their creativity, and ultimately leading them back to their best life. And I was so amazed at this story and what this guy was doing. And near the end of the book, in one of like the suffixes or indexes, he writes a little blurb about you can find a shamanic practitioner in your area. And then I was just like, holy shit, I really could. I've never looked for one before. But here in Ontario, Don, as you know, a lot of different tribes and native populations around. I thought I will more than likely find something, even if it's not on the reserve. And ironically, I found a practitioner a couple of months later working from her home in the same damn city I bought the book from in the first place, which is about an hour away from me. So I went to her for a couple of sessions and she did guided shamanic journeys and soul retrieval. And I remember driving home from her place feeling better. Was my life on track? Not as much as I would like it to be, but that spark had reunited from these sessions. And ironically, this practitioner decided to completely close her business in the summer of 2020. And I thought, well, I guess I'm going to have to find someone else. And with all the craziness of 2020, I started to say to myself, maybe I want to do this sometime because I had a whole other list of synchronicities that led to that decision, including her repeatedly telling me, you have the energy to do this. You have, I think what she said was the blue aura, which is like an energy healer's aura or something like that, right? And I shrugged it off for a while, but then in like summer 2020, I'm like, that's it. I got to make a move for this once we get a lockdown and stuff like that. And at the end of that year, I found the person who would become my teacher and my mentor for this modality, who I kid you not, lived under 20 minutes away from me and had more reasonable rates than any other practitioner offering those services within an hour or so radius of me. And I had no idea they were there until like December of 2020. And then, yeah, if you don't have any other questions, I'd actually like to tell my story about my first healing with her.
Yeah, go ahead. I'd
Okay.
love to hear it. I feel like if you got more into it, yeah.
Yeah, this I might classify as my first official paranormal experience in a way. Oddly enough. So between Christmas and New Year's of 2020, long story short, 2020 was a challenging year for everybody. I got through most of it up unscathed up until the last couple of months, and then I like fell off the rails for various reasons. And I'm sure by no coincidence, this is when my teacher came into my life as well, despite everything else going on. So I decided to book a spiritual counseling session and a table healing in a very small window between Christmas and New Year's. She was still operating out of her house. So she wasn't renting space, she wasn't at a studio. So she could still take clients as long as she had certain protocols in place. So there was no issue there. I was safe to go, right? And so we had an extra long counseling session that went late into the day. And she said, do you want to do the table healing today? And I said, no, I think I've had enough today. This has been great, but let's do it another day. So I do it, I think February 2021. I have just gone through a period of serious burnout in my life. And I go there after work because I was working really early at that point in time. And she does the table healing. And I could tell she's way more advanced and further along in her practice than the previous person I visited. Nothing bad to say about the first practitioner, but this one was like, this is where I need to be. This is who I need to learn from. And after that, the healing's done, she leans over me and says, I have to run upstairs. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Take your time getting up. Well, I was still in hustle, go, go, go mode. And I go to sit up on this table. Something shoves me back down onto my back. And I try to get up again. I can't get up. And I look around. There's nobody in that basement with me. Something was pressing down on me. Not enough to hurt me, but enough to say, chill the fuck out. You need to slow down. And eventually I surrendered and took some deep breaths. And then I slowly got up and I felt better. So, whatever was in that room, there was a spirit that came through, or a guide, whatever you want to call it, and said, gave me a really harsh message to slow down and quit moving so fast. And after that session, I think I had to grab a few groceries on the way home. And then after that, um, I went and had like the best nap of my life up until dinner time. Like it was wild, man. And that was my introduction to core shamanism. And then a few months after that, I started taking all the courses over the next year or so. And then I'm in the early stages of starting in-person practice with all that.
Um, with core shamanism, like the non-table session, is that like a connection to higher self? Like I've had some conscious connections to higher self with different energy workers. Is it something like that, or is that the general principle?
Well, what I did with the spiritual counseling, it was more or less like a spiritual slant on talk therapy. And so a lot of the trying to think of where I should start with this. A lot of the one-on-one sessions end up turning into a form of soul retrieval. And I might as well explain this right now. So, journeying is the core foundation for core shamanism. And that means being able to shut down in a meditative state with the aid of a rattle or a drum and journeying to different non physical realms to get answers for yourself or for your clients on certain issues. And we could do a whole separate podcast on my journeying stories alone over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. But that's the general gist of it. And if you have someone that needs soul retrieval work, that is anybody that has ever suffered serious trauma, which I would say are pretty much every single human being who's ever lived on the face of the earth. And when you suffer serious trauma, it depends on the degree and the level of it. A piece of your soul, your natural state of being, will break away from you, or it will get taken and kept by a not so positive entity. And the shamanic practitioner's role is to go into the non physical and get that piece of the soul back and reintegrate it with the clients. And I haven't done this a lot in my official practice, but in my training for soul retrieval, I just happen to do some really unbelievable work with helping out the people I trained with. And it's not easy work, it's not always fun, it's really intense. But when you reintegrate someone's wholeness back into them, it is a really amazing experience to see what it does to them after the fact.
Is that what people often refer to as like fractals or fractalization? Is that the similar idea? Because like I've interviewed a lot of people from the SSP and stuff, and they talk about
Right.
traumatic fractalization, use parts of their consciousness. Is it something similar to that?
Can
Like
you
you're
just give me
they've
give me a
lost part.
can you give me a little bit more of an in-depth explanation about that? Because I think they are right in line, but I just want to like fractalization isn't something I'm as familiar with as you
Yeah.
are. So,
Um in the SSP community, it's known as alters or fractalizations, and
oh
it's
yeah,
often people right. It's traumatic events that change part of your personality, and like the belief in the SSP community is that part is stolen from you and manipulated by some not so nice beings and people doing some pretty shitty things.
yeah.
And I was just wondering if that's the same concept. It's basically like part of your consciousness breaking away.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. And if you ever go down the road of mind control, MK Ultra, and other forms of abuse, a lot of those victims unfortunately dissociate. And I think dissociation, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, but this is just my opinion. Dissociation is when parts of your soul and your consciousness break off, because that piece that broke off is filled with such serious trauma that you not only blacked it out, but it broke away from you, and something is guarding it and keeping it. But it's you, it's a part of you, it's supposed to be a part of you, it's not supposed to be with somewhere else or somewhere else. Like, it's supposed to be a part of you. So when you get that back and you reintegrate it, it's very profound. And stuff that goes on with like mind control and the SSP, like that is a form of serious abuse and serious trauma. It's no different than any physical abuse here in the 3D. Any physical abuse that is suffered by anyone, especially children, they're going to lose major parts of themselves and they will fractal, and the alters will come in, and that's a whole other rabbit hole we can go down. But I think the idea is in fact very
Yeah.
similar.
Okay. No, I thank you, because like it sounded very similar, and I'm like, okay, I know some people that could probably use a trip to a shaman then, because they have the one guest I interviewed, she said she has over like 1,000 different fractals, and it's like,
Yeah.
shit, like that's gonna take you a bit.
Yeah.
Um, so the other modality that I had mentioned was the spiritual hypnosis.
Yep.
When did that come into play? And do you want to give everybody kind of your 101 on that as well? And what brought you to that interest?
Sure. I've had a fascination with hypnosis and hypnotherapy like almost as long as I can remember. And for years, and maybe this was true for years, like before we had the digital information of the internet that we have now, is I thought that type of practice was only reserved for like high-end psychiatrists and counselors who went to expensive universities. Like, I didn't know it was a practice anybody could pick up. So fast forward to the tail end of 2021, autumn 2021, I'm pretty close to finishing my shamanic courses, and I've done my level 1 Reiki. I'm going to do my level 2 a little bit down the road in early 2022, but I feel like I need something else in my toolkit. And I'm in many podcasting Facebook groups, and there's one I happen to be in where we swap guests or people look for guests. And I honestly find this strikingly beautiful woman who says she's a spiritual hypnotherapist. And I'm like, what is that? I'm like, I've never heard that term before. And at the time on the podcast, I had a monthly show called the Lightworker series, and that allowed me to kind of break canon and talk to healers and practitioners and empaths, people who wouldn't normally fit the unexplained bill. And I thought, man, she would be a perfect candidate for the show. And she's a woman who used to work in LA, grew up in Berlin, and was living in Cape Town, South Africa. Like, she'd made her rounds, currently lives in Dubai now. But she wanted to appear on people's podcasts. So I took a shot and invited her on, and she was totally game for it. Now, this is one of my shorter episodes because she only had so much time to give me, but we hit it off and we had a really good show. And then in some point in 2022, because we started following each other on social media, she announced that she was doing a spiritual hypnosis course online. And I was like, that sounds really cool. And if I could, find a way to pay for this, I think this might be the final toolkit I need to start transitioning into being a healer full time or a practitioner. And over the summer of that year, she wrote this amazing two-part series on her Instagram page about what is keeping us disempowered. And I highly resonated with everything. And actually, I shared these episodes with Spinja. And we did a two-parter in fall of 2022, just talking about that blog. And around that time when we were setting that up, Jenny goes to me, Oh, by the way, the online hypnosis course now, it's now all on demand. It can be done year round, but we do, live calls once a month. And I'm just like, this makes things so much easier for me. So fast forward again, long passage of time, spring of 2023, I get my payments figured out and I start the course and I do it all online. And I'm just like, this is awesome. Like, it's really hard to squeeze all this into my busy schedule, but when I'm able to do it, I just come alive and I get lit up. And real quick here, we're going to talk about my website later, but I want to read you some of the offerings that I have for this and some of the ones I learned directly from Jenny. And her practice is called Mind Your Subconscious, if you're ever interested in looking that up. Jennifer Schluter. So, some of the offerings I have are balancing fear versus intuition, the releasing of limited and negative beliefs, cord cutting, energetic and emotional clearing, past life regressions. I've been on the receiving end of those lately, some really amazing stuff there. Connecting to your future self and to future timelines, root cause and inner child healing, channeling the non physical, and spirit guides, power animal connection. And Jenny's course, even though I haven't gone into this yet myself, includes contacting possible angels and extraterrestrials. So there's a real metaphysical ring to it. And I have quite a bit of practice on my under my belt right now, and the practice has all been amazing.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna holler here for a second while we're on the subject. Hey, hon,
Yes. Yeah.
you want to come give that testimonial now?
Beautiful.
You can sit off camera. She's kind of bagged out and she's still in vacation mode, so she'll be audio, but
Yeah. Hey, Spenja.
Hey,
How are you?
good. Yeah, so you were.
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I've kind of had the energetic poop kicked out of me, so I've just been kind of laying low before I have to go back to the 3D.
Yep.
We were talking about Phil's hypnosis practice, and he was going through his treatments, and you've received one. Do you want to give a quick explanation of your experience on how that went for you and what the outcome's been?
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Honestly, he so Phil asked me, like what we wanted to work on, and I'm pretty open about my stuff. So there's no secrets here. Um, So I have issues with different foods and textures, and it's it's like to hear myself describe it, I sound like I'm crazy, but I'm sure there's other people like I'm finding more and more that other people are experiencing the same, and so I wanted to get down to the bottom of it because I know I need to change how I eat, but it's been an absolute battle. And so I've been trying to figure out like why this has been a battle. And so I thought, well, maybe there's some sort of trauma that I've buried and and so anyway, I told this to Phil and so during the session, he was very mindful of my emotions and like where I was like when I he like before before I went under. He explained it to me, like he made it very clear that I was in control the whole time. If I felt uncomfortable, I just had to say something and he would take me to a different place or he would take me out completely. And so during the whole experience, like I felt completely safe and I knew that like if I was going someplace, then he would help guide me back, or I could just pull the plug on everything. And there was actually one point where I did uncover some stuff, and he gave me the option, and I did end up pushing past it. And so, just to wrap everything up, we discovered that I'd had some pretty bad early childhood experiences around food, and there were some things that they probably tried me a little early with. And um, so in doing that, I've been able to break things down and get to, excuse me for a second.
Husky issue. 1 second. The dog's in the cat box.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Carry on.
Yeah.
Shit happens when you film live.
Well,
Whiskey,
apparently.
get out of the cat box. You go, I'll get him.
Okay.
Get out.
So anyway, oh my gosh, yeah, life with huskies. Um, anyway, I'm going to say, like, after the session, like, it helped me reframe how I viewed food, and I've started in baby steps. I had a raspberry Danish at work, which was not something that was normal for me. Usually I'd pick the raspberries off, and I'm like, oh no, I'm just gonna power through that. And then there was something else, but the other big one, just this past week, I tried some orange peppers and some yellow peppers, and that's the first time I've ever done that, like in any memory that I have, and it actually it went well.
Good. I love peppers, so.
Hey, I'm back from messing with the dogs. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I just kind of pop in like Harrigan the leprechaun, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's well, I'm going to say, like, it's definitely changed my life. It's helped me change my path. It's helped me reframe things, and um it's helped me with my healing journey, because I'm like, and the other thing I will say though is, I think a lot of, like, you can have the best hypnotherapist in the world, but you also need to do the work too.
Yep. And that's
And
everything I encourage with all of my clients, by the way.
yeah, exactly. So the more work you do, the more you are going to get out of it. And I would say, like, I've got a lot out of it.
Think, yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, okay. And like, if you want to, if you've noticed any changes or whatever, like, if you want to share, like, just let her rip, because
Oh, there's been several times already with foods I usually don't even offer, where she'll just like, okay, give me one. Right? Like it was a section of orange, I think,
yes,
the
yeah.
one night, right? And I was like, really? Because I'll sit and have a whole bowl of fruit, right? I'm trying
Yeah.
to get off of the junk food, so I'll just
Yeah.
munch away on. And she's just like, what do you got? And usually, if it's not a snack food, it's like, right? But lately, she's been like, yeah, give me a section, I'll try it. And I was really proud of her. And like, when she tried the peppers, it was actually when we were out at Karen Holton's house in Red
Mm.
Deer. So like, that was a huge place to take a risk. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so like the social aspect of taking a risk of eating something you don't know if it's about to make you gag.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, you poor girl, like you got this shit, like it's going. So on a personal level, I have to thank you. And I'm going to assume that was part child regression, part figuring out what
Yeah.
started it, but it absolutely highlights some of the things that you're talking about that you do specialize in.
And those services I listed earlier, what I did for Spinja was like a mishmash. It wasn't any one particular thing. It was things together plus my own intuition of reacting to what was going on in the session. Now, if you don't mind me taking things here, the host in me is starting to steer the ship. You know how it
Go
is,
ahead.
right? Um,
Yeah.
this all came to be because after you two were nice enough to come on my show, we were having this chat, and it came up that there was a really bad experience with a hypnotherapist. And whenever anybody has a negative experience with a healer, it really burns my ass, because we're at a crucial point in humanity. The world's changing, and you're going to have to change with it, or you're going to have a rough time. And a lot of that change includes how we treat and how we heal people. So if people have negative experiences with this type of thing, it does a disservice to everyone. It's not just that practitioner or one client. It's doing a disservice to the collective. So then I organically blurted out, hey, I have this background for over a year now in spiritual hypnosis. Maybe we could do an exchange. And then that's how it went from there. And I want to thank Spinja and you as well, Don, for appearing on this awesome podcast round table on the Forbidden Knowledge Network, where this session was brought up, and rightfully so. I wasn't named right away because I hadn't launched the business or the site, but what I heard from the testimonial and the one here tonight, that hit me really deeply. So I really appreciate that. And it may be a good place to rekindle a little bit of the shaman versus charlatan discussion if you're feeling that.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to get into that as well because, like, you and I, as you alluded to earlier, anybody that is doing energy work that says that you have to habitually come to them and they're not just the ones transmuting it, you know, if they're looking for a lifetime patient, they're not trying to heal you, basically.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
I would love to get your take on this because I know that you enjoyed that episode of FKN, and I, so by all means, let her rip because I would love to hear it from a healer as well.
Sure. Well, first off, I'd actually like to ask you before I get into this. You touched upon this, I think, on my show, your experiences with psychics, like the good and the bad, and I've had that share myself. Are you willing to divulge first on some of your negative psychic experiences, and then maybe we can compare?
Um, with the negative, it's a lot of what I'm getting, and especially since as soon as I changed my profile public and was in the paranormal community, I guess you would call it, it's damn near a daily or every other day thing. Oh, my love, I felt your
Oh,
energy. Please get my $20 reading. And then, or they'll offer you a free reading and they'll get into the guts of it. I've had guests tell me this when it pisses me off. They'll give him like 3/4 of a free reading. And if you want to know the rest of your wonderful future that I've outlined for you, it's just, well, you motherfucker. Like
yeah,
now
yeah.
you've got like, but no, I've heard and had so many of these shill offers show up on my doorstep. And then I've also had people like Kendrea Ellis that's on Typical Skeptic, uh, Pink Bella Aloha. These are truly gifted people that do things for the right reasons for a reasonable monetary value. Any of these energy workers or psychics that are like 222, blah, 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 I call bullshit, right? We were looking at one the other day. I don't even remember what the hell it was about, but it was $2,222 for a fucking week. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Whoa.
That is
Yeah.
2 months rent where we live,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. Um, so it's interesting you say that. I've had a lot of psychics and mediums, card readers on my show, and there's a few I've become good friends with, like especially over online. And it's funny you mention all that because I haven't seen much of these shady people sliding into DMs as much lately, or mine, or have heard about it. Um, but another thing that's like a major problem on social media are these people who will start these burner accounts and say like they'll add one extra letter to the last name or they'll put an underscore in where it's not supposed to be. And somehow, some way, they'll have like the same amount of posts and the same amount of followers as the regular accounts. But the problem is when you hit the follow button, 10 seconds later, you're getting a DM. Hey, love, I really like your energy. You know what I mean? And then you're like, oh, fuck, not this again.
yeah, I've realized that too. Like, there's some people that are legitimate and run legitimate businesses. If they're coming into your inbox or posting it on a social page, like the ones that just make me, I don't even bother reporting them. But like, say I'm on the Matrix Revolutions Awakening fan page or something, right? You'll see some asshat inbox me now and and you know it's going to lead to asking for money. And it's like, no, you're not going to tell me who's in my energy. No, you're not going to tell me who's around, because one, you don't have my permission to be in my energy, and two, I think you're probably just a shill, right? Because there is
Yeah.
a lot.
And
But as
it's
far as
interesting.
like,
Yeah.
but
No, I was just gonna say it's interesting too, because I won't mention specific names here, but some psychics who have been on my show more than others, ones with a bit of a higher profile, they seem to get targeted more. And I almost wonder if maybe they're revealing a little bit too much truth and some double agents are just posing as, spammers and creating like these fake accounts just to get them into trouble and discredit them.
that wouldn't surprise me. I did a show with Steven from BG Cast and Rob Khalil on something I've heard going around. It's called Project Oblivion. And what it is exactly what you're talking about. People being splintered into our community to spread misinformation, you know, dummy accounts, pissing people off with fake readers. And Spin and I won't mention names. There's a fairly now well-to-do person who's like explained some realities of the universe, and everybody's hating on him because he's successful. And we're like, it's almost like, okay, in the community, if you get really successful, 90% chance you're CIA op or the government's been feeding you something. But there's also that 10% that we were looking at that probably get made famous to become discredited because they're telling too much truth.
Oh, that's a good take.
Right. And
Yeah,
I think
that's a
that,
really good take.
yeah, it's exactly what you're saying too. Like there is a insurgence of bullshit, falsehoods, and swindlers coming into this community, and it's to piss everybody off. So you're like, no, no, it's not real. Exactly the existential crisis that you have had. It's trying to cause that within the community
Yeah.
because you think everything's fake and everything's bullshit and nobody knows what they're talking about.
Yeah. And just to add to that, and the people who think it's bullshit already, they will think even more so. Now, I've had I'm not really leaning towards this on the show anymore, but like I've had some skeptics on, and I've had some people, including my brother who hosts a true crime podcast, who let's just say he's not fully in on this type of stuff. He's just got a very different take and perspective on things. But I've come across people, and this happened at the podcasting conference I was at in Denver too, who they've had run-ins with psychics or mediums who don't understand boundaries and are just being, as you would say, Don, asshats, and going up to them and saying, I know clues about your missing cousin. And it's like, no, you don't. Like, and they turn out to be totally false. But what that does is I've noticed on people who stand on that side of the fence with these types of abilities, they will think it's all nonsense because they happen to bust one or two of the frauds that are making everybody else look bad. And it's like what I said earlier about the not so great practitioners. They do everybody a disservice.
No, I think that absolutely nails it. And you were talking, you had asked me to put this in my show notes, and I did. You had a run in with a manifestation coach from here in Canada that tried to rook you early on in your
Yeah,
experience. Do you want to share that one?
sure. I don't want to mention any specific names here. So this was someone who about 4 to 5 years ago seemed to have a fairly, not a huge, but a fairly prominent YouTube account with what looked like a legitimate business located in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I really liked their vibe, their energy, and their message. And when we were in the whole lockdown craziness, I thought, even though I was still working and I was able to work through that whole thing, I thought we can connect virtually. It doesn't hurt to send an email and set up a consultation. So here's red flag number one, Don. If you go to a supposed coach or healer or practitioner's website and you don't see a list of prices on said website, that's a big problem. If you don't see a specific list of services, That's a big problem. I didn't see either on this site, but man, it was one sexy professional looking website. And I was like, oh, this might be good. I send the email. They email me back and we set up a Zoom meeting. So I take it out on my balcony on a summer evening, and this person's disposition is 180 degrees opposite of what they were showing themselves on YouTube. Almost as if they didn't even want to talk to me. And I was like, okay, this is really awkward. And then I got thrown, some blanket statement got thrown at me like, oh, I see you succeeding in business. That is your calling. And not a word of a lie, back in 2019, I was pivoting to maybe start my own video production business. And ironically, even though that didn't pan out, I was going to use that to go out with paranormal investigators and then start the podcast from that. Things didn't work out that way, but that was the original plan. So when I heard this, I was like, yeah, that's bang on. So then I was like, where do we go from here? And once again, this person's in like a bad mood the whole time. And they're just like, oh, there's this, and this. If you want to continue with me, my rate is $5,000. What?
What?
And I was just like, yeah, I'll get back to you on that. And then the call ended. And I mean, I bet they hear about that all the time. But I just, when you get that funny feeling in your solar plexus in your sternum, I was just like, what in the world just happened? So later that evening, I went for a walk and I did a shamanic journey into the lower world, the non-physical. And if we want to do extra explanations about that, I'll probably come back for round two on the show because that could take up a whole program.
Yeah.
But I got the answer I needed about this person, and I was shown a vision of all these TV screens, and their face was appearing on them, but I couldn't hear what they were saying, or there was static coming out of their mouth. And then I journaled it and I went back to their YouTube page and I watched a couple of videos. And then I won't get into the specifics, but I saw the red flags in the videos and I was like, oh, yeah. I'm like, if I go any further with this, I'm going to get massively screwed. And the clues were like in the damn YouTube videos, and Spirit showed them to me in my shamanic journey. And I went to that journey because I had such a funny feeling, and that number sounded so ridiculous and astronomical to me. And I'm almost curious to go on YouTube to see if this person's still going, but I would highly doubt it. Full-fledged grifter, and if they are still going, they've likely packed up and left Canada.
That's insane. So, did you pay for the initial call?
No, no, no. The initial call was a free consultation, but when you
Okay.
email for the free consultation, and this circles back to what I said earlier, there's no specific services listed and there's no pricing. And when I give out my website at the end of this interview, you will see both on my site. Full transparency, no hidden nonsense.
I'll actually attach the links in the show
Yeah,
description.
yeah.
That one took a second to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Oh,
It was so funny, Don, is like
uh,
I had blocked it from my conscious memory until you and I were chatting about putting this together. And then I was like, it just came back to me like a lightning bolt. And I'm like, I need to share this. And I'm not sure if I've even shared this on my own podcast. This needs to be heard.
yeah. Um,
So sorry.
Speaking of, do you want to get into what your podcast is all about and when it's on, and
Yeah.
or do you got more? We
I
can go
have one
more.
I have one more aspect of this I want to discuss with you.
Let's
Back
go.
in the day when you were living on in Ontario, did you ever go and visit like the psychic fair circuit at all?
As close as I got to that is I dated a Wiccan chick and went to some psychics and some festivals and shit like that. There was some naked dancing and some drinking and some
Cool.
Vikings and all kinds of cool shit. But yeah, I dabbled in it.
All right. The reason I bring it up is that so I live near a fairly local famous banquet hall, or infamous, however you want to look at it. But they host a lot of those types of events every year. So over the years and before I stepped into becoming a practitioner and strengthened my own connection with spirit and future timelines, I used to go to these fairs every so often, right? And at those fairs, Don, I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of the psychic world. And from what I can remember, because once again, I think I blocked some of these out of my conscious mind. Um, I had one psychic who seemed legit, but then performed this whole dog and pony show and acted like they were in a trance and all this garbage. And their reading really didn't offer me a lot of insight. It was one of those things like, there's a psychological term where you throw so much information so fast at someone they can't comprehend what you're saying. I don't remember what the term is for it, but they were basically using that. That was like their whole shtick. So I wasn't
Yeah.
happy about that one. And I had another one, I kid you not, tell me this was in like September or something, and they're like, "Oh, next winter you have to be careful. You're going to get into a horrible car accident." And guess what? I never even got close to coming in a car accident. So I'm like, why would you say that to somebody at a reading, right? And there was another
Yeah.
one who I thought seemed okay and seemed pleasant, but then was like, I see you having a career in baking. And I'm like, I have zero connection to baking whatsoever. So, like, I don't know where you're coming up with this shit. So, like, I just wanted to point out those are some of the extremes at those psychic fairs. For people who are interested in going, by all means go, especially if the door price is low, but really tap into your intuition and use your discernment, because some of these crap psychics, they hide it until you're sitting across the table from them and you've already paid. And then you're like, oh, this wasn't it. And just to wrap on this part of the segment is I my good friend Laura Lee, who has been on the podcast a couple of times, and she does Reiki and is a reader herself. Lovely woman, good people. She was at an expo in downtown Toronto at the end of July, and I wanted to go to Toronto anyway, do some hiking on the waterfront, whatever, spend a nice sunny day out there. So I thought, oh, I'm gonna come see you at this expo. Anyway, I had my session with her. It was all really good. But the problem was I was walking around there and I saw some of the psychics that I've seen on the circuit for years and years. And once again, I won't mention any names, but my intuition is telling me, oh God, they're still at it. They are so full of shit. Like people that I can get a read on from a distance that I know are bogus, they're still doing the circuit. And I'm just like, oh boy. That's all I can say. It's kind of sad.
What one footnote I want to add into that, and I can't remember when, but I was talking to Matthew Mornian, and I asked him, it was just this random question that popped into my mind. I was like, why do psychics look up and to the left? Right? I've noticed psychics that can get a beat on you, they always like, and it's instinctual. They don't even mean to do it. I've just seen certain talented ones. It's always up and to the left. And I asked him, and I'm like, why is that? And he's like, actually, that lines up with something because there's actually a weak spot in your auric field at a certain degree that we tend to receive information from light source information, right?
Right.
So when you're channeling or grabbing the information, it's up and to the left because that's generally where the hole is or the weak spot in your auric field to receive information. So I don't know if that is 100% factual on every psychic, but I've seen it to be true in a lot that I would give some high scores to anyway.
Another quick thing I want to point out, and then we can get into my podcast, is without intending to do this, throughout earlier in the summer, I had three separate readings in the span of a month. Three people that don't know each other. Um, Two of them I'd seen for the first time, and the other one being Laura Lee that I mentioned. And they were all really amazing, positive readings with some of the relative same messages, but none of these people knew each other. And to my knowledge, all three of these readers are honest, good people. So There is some magic into this if you could find it in the right way. And I was guided to that because I wasn't looking for one reading, let alone three in the span of a month, but it all lined up.
Yeah, and again, a lot of it is our bodies are the best lie detectors we have. Like if
Yep.
you get a shit feeling about somebody, there's a pretty good chance they're a shitty person, right? I hate to simplify life that quickly or easily, but it, especially when it comes to energy workers and people asking you for money for things, you want to be sure that the person is actually able to deliver the service that they're selling you or
Sure. And
providing you. I guess.
I just want to say one quick thing about the monetary aspect of this. I honestly believe in my heart of hearts that every practitioner is allowed to set their own prices and do what they feel their value is and what they think is fair. But there is a limit to that. If a practitioner wants to set rates where they can make a living that may be a little on the high end, I'm okay with it as long as they have a good reputation and that they have a known track record for delivering value at the price point they set. Like, what was the thing you were telling me earlier about like 2200 or $222? Like, what was
Oh,
that figure that
yeah,
was just
actually,
astronomical?
oh, there was one for $2,200, and it was $22,222 for a week long training course. But I even know hypnotherapists, and again, I'm not going to say anybody's name. Three 333, 555. Like, who the hell has $555 for a hypnosis session? Not the average person that might need it,
Hmm.
right? And I get setting what you think you're worth, but if you're making yourself unattainable, you're not going to help anybody,
Yeah,
even if you are
exactly.
gifted.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
don't believe people should work for super low prices or for free on account of personal
No,
guilt. That doesn't work either. And
no.
for a lot of people in this realm as well, because I've seen this with my own eyes, if you're having trouble with your price points or getting clients, find side work that maybe has nothing to do with your practice, but can help you keep food on the table and the lights on. Don't stress yourself and break yourself and get in to that bullshit hustle culture mindset that it's all or nothing. That's not what this is about. This is about to be built organically so you can make a comfortable living doing service for others, not breaking your back and your brain just because that's what Western society teaches you.
I I think that's great. Um, so before we get into your show, we'll get there in a
Yep.
second.
Yep.
Just be to end all of this off for Reiki, hypnosis, core shamanism. Where would you tell people to start? Right, if somebody wanted to go in each one of these or all of it at once, where would you tell them to start? Like you're just becoming energetically aware, you want to get into this.
So I'm going to start with the practice part of it. And this is what I did is find people close to you to do energy exchanges with to beef up your practice and your confidence. And, I did one with Spinja, but I've done many with many others. And this will get you a feel for how good you are at what your modality is and what your value is. And not to avoid the question, but there is no set number you can start at. But I find the market rate, like for a Reiki session, 60 minutes, will be $100 to $200, give or take. Anything above that's probably too much. Anything below that is probably too much or too little. And if your prices are too low, you will draw in low vibe clients. Mark my words on that for anything really, and that's not even just the metaphysical stuff. Um, so my advice on that is to practice with energy exchanges and get your confidence and your skill set up. That'll help you determine your own value. And then look around local practitioners or even bigger practitioners, see what they're charging and see what you think is fair. And one message I keep getting from Spirit over the last couple of years pertaining to myself is you're not charging enough. You're more valuable than that. And I'm just finally starting to believe that about myself. So I think that's the best thing you can do.
I think that's great advice and a great stepping stone for anybody looking to dip their toe in or at least look at it. I I've messed around with some energy work. We have an old cranky husky that
Yeah.
he's got issues with his hips, and I swear to source, man, I will pull energy from this dog's back out the rear end, and he'll look at me like, "Do it again," and I'll do it again, and he will literally lick my face when I'm done. He
Yeah.
tells me when I'm done taking the negativity out and sticking it in the ground.
Yeah, there is specific offerings for animal Reiki, and actually that's training I could get if I am ever called to it. But our furry friends, they like getting the energy moved as well. And in fact, from what I've heard, they love it. So keep that in mind too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we'll jump into your podcast, which is, I'm blanking on the name, Unexplained Incorporated.
Yes, sir. What would you like to know?
When did you start it? What are your guests about in general? Like, what is
Sure.
the theme, I guess, canon of your show?
So I
So, in
started.
case,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I started March of 2020. So I'll tell this story here. I've told it on my show many times, but there's many who are likely hearing this for the first time. I started planning this show sometime in 2019, back when I was going to do the videography thing. And then my Reiki practitioner, who was also the psychic medium at the time, she helped me in a way start the show. She got me connected with some people and she agreed to come on and do a monthly segment called the Psychic Mailbag, which lasted about a year, which was great. And she was helping me with a lot of things behind the scenes. And that was in the fall of 2019. And I decided that when we got into the early end of 2020, I was like, oh, the first day of spring. That's the day I want to launch this thing. March 20th, 2020. What else happened around that point in time, Don? I'm drawing a blank here.
oh, everything closed mysteriously.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of intuition, every time we went through one of those in Ontario, I got a funny feeling in my heart and solar plexus, and I was overdue for a haircut. So it was like my own barometer and warning. Um, So what I did was I didn't have a guest on for the first time until April of that year. So I recorded the first two episodes solo by myself. And not too far from where I live at the time, there is a place like a commercial dwelling that rented office space by the hour. And I was like, I wasn't comfortable with recording at home. I didn't have the setup I have now. I was like, I might as well, on one of my days off, pay for like a 2 hour session, bang out my first two episodes, and then that's that. Well, I go in there. I had had email correspondence with the manager, and everything was all good. The manager was off that day. And if the girl working there that day was not high on drugs, she was one of the stupidest people I have ever met in my life. And on top of that, the room I'm booked next door, I kid you not, there's a corporate meeting going on with catering with about 20 to 30 people. So if you listen to my first two episodes, my first two solo episodes, if you listen really closely, you'll hear this. Those are the 20 people next door that I couldn't filter out. So I, yeah. So that was in early March of 2020. 2 weeks later, shit hits the fan and everything gets locked down. And I take a pause and I go, is anybody going to really care about what I'm doing? Should I even go through with this? Because things are crazy right now and I don't know what's going on. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed and I postponed the show 1 week. So it premiered March 27th, 2020, and it went weekly nonstop until April of 2022. And then I took a little hiatus. I switched the show to a 12 season format with some seasonal breaks. I did 3 seasons, but then due to various changes on Good Friday of this year, the 4 year anniversary of the show, I returned to weekly and now incorporate solo episodes. So, what is the show about, since we got through that wonderful story of my launching adventure?
Yeah.
So in 2022, when I was on the break, the show at first was Unexplained Incorporated. We're open for business and ready to believe you. It was strictly going to be a paranormal and unexplained podcast. I had these grandiose visions of going out with local investigators. Some of them I got to know before the lockdowns. And we were going to review our footage, and we were going to rent space in a metaphysical shop and do this video cast like we were the next coming of Joe Rogan or something. Anyway, 2020 wiped all that out, flushed it all the way down the toilet. So I said, okay, there's this Zoom thing, this Skype thing I was using at the time. We can do it this way and we'll make things work. I'll grow it out on my own or whatever. And that line, open for business and ready to believe you, comes from the original Ghostbusters, because I crack up every time they show the TV commercial and they go, "We're ready to believe you." So that was my own little homage to that. And
Yeah.
some of the graphic designs I was making with the show logo were about a skeleton character in a metaphysical store, and each offering behind the counter would be a different aspect of the unexplained, and that would represent the episodes. None of that went to plan. That's a whole other story in and of itself. But the more the show went on and the crazier 2020 and 2021 got, things just started to get more spiritual, and it coincided to the deeper I got into my shamanic practice and all that. So then in 2020, yeah, it was 2021, I started doing the light worker of the month to kind of branch off from the paranormal and the unexplained a little bit, kind of freshen things up a bit. And I loved those segments. And as the producer and being the lone wolf, it was easy programming, because once a month I could find someone who didn't necessarily fit the unexplained bill, and we'd have like really good chats and episodes together. And then in 2022, I started to experience some burnout, which was too bad because the show was on an amazing ride, getting amazing momentum. And April 1st, 2022, I had to do a show basically to say, I need a break. I'm going to come back in September. I need to take spring and summer off. And then throughout that summer, and a lot of this was after my chats with Jenny, the hypnotherapist, I came up with the current and last show moniker, Unexplained Incorporated, where the unknown connects with the empowered. The Lightworker series was no more. This was going to be the show where the paranormal and the spiritual collided and meshed together, because when you go down the unexplained road, when you go down the conspiracy road and the spiritual road, they all intersect in this one crazy roundabouts, and you can't avoid one or the other. So, yeah, like it's an unknown buffet. I got a bit of everything to offer, ghosts, ETs, psychics, mediums, healers, some cryptid talk. I don't get into the cryptid stuff as much, but I like to dabble in that once in a while. And just a lot of consciousness exploration, similar to what you're doing as well.
That's awesome. I know spin like is like, oh, you have to check this one out, and I get so inundated with like, check this out, check this. It's
Yeah.
weird. I like, didn't even think this would get off the ground. I now have people with like 10,000 followers like, hey, have I been on your show yet? I'm like, I don't know, who the hell are you? Right? Because like I literally just kind of stumble upon people, and it's like, oh, this guy is interesting as hell. Let's watch a bunch of his stuff, and that's how I find podcasters. Like I for about the first 3 months, people are like, "Oh, do you know about this guy?" I'm like, "Who? Do
Yeah.
you know about this
Yeah.
guy? Who?" And they're like mainstays in this whole community. And I'm like, I look like the newbie because I am the newbie, and I love coming from this point to do this show, is
Yeah.
because I think I have as many questions as most people just coming into this, because I just got kicked out of bed last year. Like, get the fuck up, it's time to go. Right?
Yeah. And just to paraphrase our mutual friend acquaintance, Chris Matthew, I don't know shit. Like, I speak perspectives of my truth. My guests speak perspectives of their truth. Nobody is all knowing about anything. We're all here exploring and asking the same questions.
Yeah, I think that's one of the wisest quotes I've ever heard. Is Chris's, and he says it
Yeah,
not just on the in private conversation. We've had chats, and it's like
yeah,
I don't know shit,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like even the stuff I come out with sometimes, it's like I think it's this way, and if I'm wrong, please somebody tell me. But I think it works like this, right?
Um,
I don't even know.
yeah, and just a related note on that is that oh geez, I just lost my train of thought on that. I'll get back to that. But anyway, um, I'd like to briefly share what's coming up on the show because I've had some really interesting stuff happen this month of August. So when this goes to air this previous week, the show that aired on August the 16th, my latest show, one of the fucking craziest interviews I have ever done. And this was a guest that wasn't supposed to be scheduled. This was someone I found online wanting to come on on podcasts because another scheduled guest I had seemed to have flaked on me. So I brought them in at the last minute and they tell me beforehand, "Oh, I got a story you're not going to believe." And when they got into it, I was like, "Oh, man, I don't know if I believe this, but I love listening to this." And it's a paranormal investigator out of North Carolina. And if what he says all lines up, he could be changing the way certain investigations are being done moving forward. And when you listen to that one, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, because that one really had me like in a headspin. I'll tell you right now. Um, can I take a second to talk about my solo episodes? Because since I
Yeah,
relaunched this year, the show has taken on different layers. Okay. Um, because there's certain things I want to discuss on the show and to preserve my sanity of not getting entangled in booking mishaps all the time, like the one I just recently had. I decided that I'm in a place where I have enough wisdom, experience, and confidence to do solo episodes, even though I don't know shit, right?
yeah,
um, so I'm going to lay those on you right now. Next Friday, the 23rd, the weekend of my 42nd birthday, which it will be, I am releasing The Great Escape. And The Great Escape is a solo episode where, and it's taken on a life of its own. This will be the third edition of The Great Escape. And this is just my blueprint and my mindset for you to build your best life and escape the matrix as far as you possibly can. And what I love about doing these is that I get to geek out on things I wouldn't normally get to geek out on the show. But if you can suffer through my geeking out and stay tuned, you'll see there's a specific purpose for why I'm talking about a certain thing on these episodes. And this is chapter 3. When I was recording the second episode that I released in the middle of June, I had an epiphany. I was like, The Great Escape is not going to be a random series of episodes to fill airtime. This is going to be a digital novel of the journey. And at some point, there's going to be a final episode of this, and it's all going to tie together. Chapter 3 is going to air next Friday. Another show I have, the Consciousness Cafe more or less replaced the Lightworker series. It's chats I try to keep to an hour with a lot of practitioners, healers, and it's more of a chat. It's less of an interview style and just like riffing back and forth. Sometimes it goes longer than an hour. Sometimes it goes under. And I have one airing August 30th that I recorded the other night with a returning guest, one of my friends from Australia, Catherine Hand, the organizer of the Cosmic Consciousness Conference. And I won't get into too much detail, but she opens up publicly for the very first time about being on the receiving end of a psychic attack and how she recovered from it. And it's a very harrowing story, and I'm really honored that she chose my platform to open up about it publicly for the first time because it takes up quite a bit of time on the show. And I did one of these last month, and I won't be doing them again for a while. But there's also the astral reports. Now, I plead guilty as charged back in the spring and earlier this year when Chris Matthew was doing the trip report. on his psychedelics, I got the idea to do astral projections, which I kind of got shown the ropes of late last year. And to raise that, I decided to go back and project back to unexplained moments in time to see if I could get an alternative perspective on them. And so far, I've gone to two different UFO crashes that happened in the 1960s, one in US, one here in Canada. And I don't know where the next one's going to take me. And I always say, this is for entertainment purposes only. I don't know shit. This is just what I see on my journeys, and I journal about it. I record it into my phone, then put it onto the hard drive, and it's very raw. And those episodes are the shorter ones. So we got the regular shows, the Consciousness Cafe, Astral Report, um, The Great Escape, and I can't go too in depth here, but Halloween night 2024, there's going to be another level to all of this, and that's all I can say for now.
So you're definitely going to want to like and subscribe to his channel because you're going to want to catch all of that. I just have to. Your chapter 3 actually sounds like an FKN panel discussion that's coming up. It was actually Stephen Stathis's suggestion on how to design our way out of the Matrix and the whole new world thing. We're actually doing it on the 26th. It's not the
funny.
exact same, but just like get the because it's going to be very simple concepts.
Well, that's not specifically the episode I'm doing that day. That's the whole story. That's like the overview of the whole story. What I'm posting on the 23rd actually is the understanding and application of the 7 Hermetic principles, because that's something I follow dearly, and it's something I haven't really discussed on the show as of yet. And I'm putting in some of my own takes on the principles on that episode. But that's a big part of getting one foot out of the matrix, is understanding those.
So I'm going to be checking that one out for sure because I'll be taking notes. You can always tell when me and Spin's interested because we have a notebook.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know. So I guess we can wrap there, Phil. I want to thank you so much. This has been like an over an hour of just like great information, great chat, and I think we got some really good information out. Also, I want to talk to you after I cut here because there's a couple of sessions you mentioned that I might be interested in once I can get some shit worked out myself.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah.
But aside from that, I'm going to thank everybody from listening, and I will catch you next time. And thank you.